What's up, everybody? Silver Bear here, coming back at you once again. Welcome back to Silver Bear Insights, where we're going to talk about schools and what the best schooling is for our conservatives and our nation. And I'm here with Edwin Hahn. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Edwin Hahn. I'm a community organizer and a freedom fighter, and I'm also running for state senate here in 2022, right in District 4 of Minnesota. And excited today to have a conversation with Paul. We're talking about education and schools.
All right, let's get into it. The most important thing here is that we dive right into the details. So, in a world where liberalism is infecting our society at every level, the reality of losing our conservative culture is entire. Wait, I wrote this. I'm going to have to just ignore the what I wrote. But
Yeah.
so conservative schooling is being attacked right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have we have teachers in our schools that just do not value what we value, and they're teaching our kids.
Totally.
They're getting them to question their sexuality, question their patriotism, their heritage, and making them feel like they're hateful racists and stuff. And they're just little kids. They don't need to be faced with these kinds of details. You know,
Totally. I mean, obviously, there's an agenda behind all of that. So go ahead.
for sure, for sure. The parents starting to realize these things, and starting to take a closer look at this and starting to take control of the situation. Well, today we have a special treat where we have some old newspaper articles, and we're gonna look at it. It's about schooling. It's from 1939, and we're gonna see what was going on in that time frame. Back then, there's a real quick overlay here. There was a fight between public schools and community schools. The community schools being a one-room schoolhouse, right? The push for public schools was really hard, so much that they actually made laws that forced you to send your kids to these public schools or to have them educated in some way. So that's how much pushback there was. Just like with all the stuff we saw in the past couple of years, we don't want to go into it because we don't want to get a strike on this, YouTube channel. But they try to make laws to push it because there was pushback from the people. So, are you able to pull those articles up?
Yeah, let's just jump
Okay.
jump right to that classic article newspaper. So here it is. Current events. The National School Newspaper. So this is a Paul dug this out of his family archives. Week of November 6th to 10, 1939. And this publication had been in print for 39 years on this date. Larger circulation than any other school paper in the world. And they were just talking about how World War One ended 21 years ago on this day. But here, go ahead, Paul.
All right. Well, if you can go to that first part of the that I marked with the little red dot, we'll go there, and then we'll coming up. There it is. So here, it actually addresses one-room schoolhouses directly. As you can see there, that the most of the information is on the next one. If you want to switch to go to the next page, here we go. So it's talking about like taxpayers or taxes not being able to cover for these schools, and that these kids aren't getting enough education. The teachers aren't getting paid well, so they have the worst teachers, I guess. So that's kind of like these are issues. What I want to talk about here is that these issues were real back then in this time. Okay, we were a developing nation. We were still kind of in our infancy or coming out of our infancy, right? And nowadays, we have so much technology. These problems are not an issue anymore. We have gone so far beyond these problems. They don't exist. So why are we still doing public schools? Public schools were supposed to be a remedy for these problems, but now that the problems don't exist, we need to get back to these, to a one room schoolhouse, and whatever other education there is, and get rid of public schools. So
Totally. And it's like, hey, the internet, you got the biggest library right in your pocket. The biggest library the world has ever seen is it's just sitting right in your pocket right here in
that's
your
right.
cell phone. Just the amount of information that we have so powerful at our fingertips.
Yep.
And so the school really it's right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so totally it's the idea of the necessity of a public school system is outdated, right? I think it's antiquated.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying
You know,
too.
I can attest to this about the rural education. When I lived in Tennessee, Northeast Tennessee, Southwest Virginia, I put a lot of fiber optic cable out there, and we took fiber optic cable way out into the mountains. Where these people just some of these houses just recently got electricity. Okay, I mean,
Okay, well, that's some backwoods housing. Yeah, go
yeah.
ahead.
So these kids out there, they have access to the internet now. I mean, some people might argue that's a bad thing. Okay, I'm not going to argue against that. That's for sure. But if you use properly, these kids and these people out there in the rural areas, they don't have anything stopping them now. So these, they can use that to their advantage and have these community schools.
Mm-hmm.
Again, they used to have a lot of them out there. I actually visited a two-room schoolhouse there in Virginia. I think it was Nicholsville, Virginia, in Scott County, Virginia. And it was well kept. The guy that owned the property showed us around and told us about it. It was pretty good. So they could probably even use the same building if they wanted to.
Well, if we don't mind, Paul, we just jump back to the newspaper article
Sure.
on how did public schools actually come into existence? Well, what were they pitching? Well, how were they selling the idea of a public school? Because public schools didn't always used to exist. In fact, there was a large resistance against public funded schools and creating this
That's right.
nationalized school system. So I'm just going to jump right back to some of these articles that you gave us, and we're right here now. Um, one of the ideas was that we needed public schools to make good citizens, right?
Yeah, I believe that's down a little bit further. There you go.
Yeah, yeah. There's a couple little highlights here about voters who cannot read.
You can kind of say that's we have some of those voters still. They can read, they just don't understand.
So you just want to share a little bit more about what you found in these newspaper clippings?
Yeah. If you go to where I marked in blue,
The
there you
blue.
go.
There you go.
So now this is curious to me. Our country does not have a national controlled system of schools. Now this is back in 1939. We do today. We have a nationally controlled school system, and here it talks about why we don't have that, and we'll get into that in a minute. But it says each state has its own public school system to a great extent. Each community is responsible for its own schools.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the way things were.
Right. Current state of the art in 1939. Each community was responsible for its own schools.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you keep
Yep.
reading, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I just want to back up a little bit because it's relevant as to how are they billing this as a good thing? They were saying about in some countries, education is controlled by the government.
Yep.
This is true in Germany, Italy, and in Russia.
Right.
And now remember, these countries, they weren't exactly subscribers to the American ideologies, were they?
That's right. Yeah.
Well, you want to share a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So these countries we were at odds with during this time, they they point out that public schooling is dangerous, and that's why these countries use public schooling to control their citizens and to feed them ideology that we don't value, right? And if you look at today, we're kind of in this. Our kids are being taught communism and fascism and probably Nazi ideas. I don't know.
Yeah.
But,
So they kind of pitch it as it's a double-edged sword, and so they say It's such control makes it possible for the government to see that only ideas favorable to it are taught in the schools. So thus children in Germany are schooled in Nazi ideas, children in Italy are schooled in fascism, and then it goes on to talk about, I think what Russian schools are schooled in communism.
Yeah.
This is the way these
Yeah.
countries train for citizenship to make us good citizens in our public schools, is how this thing was sold back in 1939. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's there's one part of this article, see where did it go? Like they were talking about, maybe it's the next one. It goes back to right after that. That goes right back to how poor the rural schools are. So it's kind of like it's kind of warming people, the reader up for the pitch of public schools, right?
Yeah.
And
Some communities are too poor and probably will always be too poor to support good schools. The children of these communities grew up without proper training for citizenship, right? So we've got to make good American citizens. That means we've got to school them in public schools so we can control the ideology of Americanism, right? It's kind of how they're pitching it.
yeah. For this reason, many persons argue the federal government should not, or excuse me, should help to support the schools. So now that's a pitch for the government to help.
Yeah.
Right.
There you go. Mm-hmm.
But then there's pushback in this article.
Yeah.
On the next one.
This one here.
That one there, yeah. Others argue against federal aid for the schools. They point to the very thing that is happening in some European countries and this country today, actually. They think the government, by supplying money to the schools, might have more and more to say about the things taught in these schools. And then the kicker is right here in red. Go down a little bit more if you could.
Yep.
Okay.
Keep going.
They fear that the freedom of thought and speech might be lost. Yeah. There you go.
Totally.
I mean,
totally.
And that's happening.
Yep.
That these people that were pushing back, they were right. They were right, and we can see that they were right.
Yeah, the fear back in 1939 of adopting a publicly funded school system, because we were not publicly, we didn't have public schools until until just after 1939, or in the 40s anyway. So for the first what would you say? What is that? 70 years or so of our 170 years of our nation, we didn't have public schools.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right.
Because why? The fear is that federal aid would not preserve democracy, but destroy it. And that is actually happening today.
We have
Those fears are realized.
We have state education. We have state media. We have the federal government controlling everything in our lives right now.
Yep.
And as this article pointed out, that's what Nazis do. That's what fascists do. That's what communists do. Right?
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've got the government corporate apparatus that is controlling just about every aspect of our life now.
Yeah. So let's see here. So that's kind of like the nuts and bolts of what that's the fear. That's kind of like what I'm worried about and concerned about. Oh, go to that footnote. There's a footnote.
The WPA one.
Yeah,
this one.
A footnote that says. So even though it says like, oh, we're afraid of it, and then they're like, oh, but by the way, the government's already funding it, right?
Yeah, and just to give context to the viewers about WPA, that was the Works Public Administration, I believe, program that was started by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the president at the time, to try to, it's a socialist program, to try to draw the United States out of the Great Depression. So he had put together a ton of socialist programs, creating federally paid jobs, federally funded jobs, and work programs. In fact, if you go to most state parks today in Minnesota, just about every single one of them was created under the Works Progress. Maybe it's Works Progress Administration. And what it is, you can find the little plaques on the buildings still.
Oh, really?
Built in 1939 or 1940, whatever, maybe 1936. With the WPA, administration, and it has usually a little history about it. But yeah, You right down the road here, 15 miles away in Buffalo State Park. You can see it. You can see it. I've been all over to all these parks around the state exploring, and yeah, just about every single one of them was built during that time because that's what they did, right? They
Right.
they kind of put everybody to busy work and started printing money
Yeah.
and controlled. What else did they control? You got some knowledge on this. They set up the Federal
Well,
Reserve, but why don't you
they
tell a
can
little bit more about it?
they control their money. When you control the people's money, you kind of control what they can and can't do, and how much damage that they can cause to the federal government. If they take our money away from us, we can't really fight them. They make it so that they use violence for people to pay taxes. I mean, if you refuse to pay your taxes, people don't understand that it as actually violent. They use violent tactics because if you refuse to pay your taxes, they're gonna charge you. If you
Like
refuse to pay that,
Ruby Ridge,
yeah,
David Koresh, and I forgot what they're. Oh, Waco, yeah, Waco,
yeah. There's
Texas.
there's a lot of people, and even people who weren't in the news for being smeared. I mean, they're just regular old people too. I mean, those
Hmm.
people were. I don't know them personally, but I don't think they were near as bad as what the media said. You know.
Hmm. Hmm.
But yeah, we have a big problem with the taxes. I do have some ideas on different taxation ways to do taxes, so it works out for everybody. We could talk about that in another episode here. But
Let me jump back to the article. I just want maybe
sure.
one or two more things to cover. One of them was about this whole idea of citizenship. Citizenship. What does that even mean? We're talking about um, these records show how eager boys and girls are for this training and what fine citizens they are capable of being.
Wow.
So, what is this word about? Citizenship.
Oh yeah, you want to talk about citizenship? Yeah,
Yeah,
a
just
citizen.
just quick. Go ahead.
Yeah, a citizen is actually. You can look into this a little bit more, if you'd like. But citizen is not a free person in the United States. A citizen is a subject of the king, and you basically need a license to do everything, like get married, drive a car, fish. There's no reason for licenses for all these things. Okay, what you're doing when you get a license, when you're a citizen, you get a license, and you're asking permission of the government when they're not the ones that give you the permission. It's God's will. God gave us the permission. We have the rights, right? There's other ways to regulate fish and wildlife. You don't need to issue licenses. There's other ways to regulate traffic and automobile stuff. You don't need the license. You don't need a license to own a business. There's other ways to go about it. But a license in general is asking the government permission. May I please run a business? May I please get married? May I please drive this automobile? May I please catch fish? Okay.
Yeah,
That's what,
kissing the ring of the king. If it so pleases the crown, may I drive a vehicle?
yeah,
Right?
basically.
Yeah, and I'm just going to hit
So,
this home hard on this article from 1939, pushing public schools. I'll just hammer it home once again. They say,
yeah.
thus, children in Germany are schooled in Nazi ideas. Children in Italy are schooled in fascism, and children in Russia are schooled in communism.
Yep.
This is the way these countries train for citizenship. So that's kind of the idea, right?
Yeah.
Train yourself to be good subjects to the king.
Yeah. And that's what they're doing here. That's kind of they're getting their dirty little paws in there, forcing it. So,
So almost, to help people understand this, the basic idea of public schools, the way that was pitched to us, is vastly anti-American
oh yeah,
because the
big time.
founding of our nation was in rebellion to a king,
That's right.
rebellion to a royalty class, to a
Yep.
elite ruling class of people.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly
Yep.
right. So let's see here. So what can a person do to change these things? That's kind of what we're about. I don't want to have a YouTube channel where we just complain about stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Draw attention to the thing that's the problem, and then try to find solutions. So solutions in this. You can ask. Let's see. You can find out who's on the school board. What kind of people are these people in the school board? What kind of teachers are there? Not all schools have transparency for their school board members or their teachers, and you need to push for that. We want full transparency because you wouldn't take your kids and just give them off to a stranger, you know. My mother had a rule when we went to the babysitters, she would just walk in. Anywhere that we were as kids, she would just walk in. And she said, and some of them were like, most people were fine with it because they're like, oh, I get it. I would probably do the same thing. You know, it's what they're thinking. But some of the babysitters or the daycare or whatever would get angry. And my mom said, well, if my kids are on the other side of this door, I'm just coming in. So I'm not knocking or anything. Because she understood my kids are technically with strangers. I don't like it, but I have to do it because I have to go to work. You know, so.
But just building on that too is that as a parent of that child, you you handed the child over to a caretaker, but that doesn't mean you relinquish your authority as a parent.
Sure.
That means that she had the authority to enter that space
Yeah.
because her child was there, and that no one could say no. You can't say no. You can't come in here. I got your child. You can't come in here. No, that's as a parent. That's your child.
Yeah.
You have the authority to enter into that house.
Yeah. Yeah. It's she was careful. That's what we need to be like. You know, you got to find out. You know, some of these teachers are Marxists. Some of them are sexual deviants. You know, some of these people are some of the worst people on the planet. Are teachers. People who are predators, child predators. They go right into these fields on purpose for a reason.
And we've seen some of that because you see the reports. In fact,
Yeah.
we don't want to hammer on people until they're innocent until proven guilty.
Right.
But just this
Exactly.
week, we've got a charge against a Fargo public school
Oh,
teacher
really?
about
Okay.
inappropriate touching and whatever. But I won't beat up too much on. I don't want to beat up
Yeah.
too much because on teachers, because both my parents, they were
Oh, were
they
they
were
really?
career
Oh,
educators. Yeah,
nice.
they
Okay.
were both career educators. So there are some good ones out there.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
not all bad, but you're right that these fields draw predators. We'll say.
Yeah. Now I have to say, like my education wasn't very long. I pretty much taught myself, but the teachers I had when I was young, they were all really good teachers. You know, nothing to worry about. So I mean, yeah, teachers are great. Educators are awesome. But some of the things you can do as a parent, though, for this is to find out what's going on. Be involved in your kids' education and where they're at and what you know. I would ask my kids every time I saw them after school. I would ask them about school. They hated it. Okay, they were like, "Oh, come on, Dad, we just talk about something else," you know. But it's like, yeah, I want to know, you know.
Yeah.
And sometimes they were being taught some things that I didn't like, and I'd have to reteach them. You know, they went
Mm.
to public school. If you send your kids to public school, you need to teach them at home too, and that's what I did. I explained to them the nuts and bolts of the Civil War when they were learning that, and how like the school's going to teach you one way, and this is actually what happened. There's more to it, and things like that. You know, just trying to like get them through school with a conservative mind, and so far so good. I mean, one of my son is 19. He's fine. He's got mostly conservative values. I mean, just a regular kid, like goes to work and everything. So hard worker. My daughter, she's being bombarded with some of this woke stuff, this you know, sexual orientation type stuff, things like that. She sticks to personally her values, but I see her welcoming in all this stuff, all this weird stuff, you know, and we avoid that. Well, she avoids the conversation. I'm willing to have it with her, but she doesn't. She avoids it. So, but I
That
think,
gets in a whole other issue of what we tolerate. I
yeah,
think we talked about it a little bit in the last episode is what we tolerate, what we recognize, and then what we celebrate, is distinguishing between all those things.
yeah,
Back real quick in terms as far as actual action items
oh
parents
yeah,
can do about, tackling this problem with the public schools. One you just said is basically unlearn and get involved in your kids'
yeah, for
schooling,
sure.
and then you might have to unlearn them. Might have to teach them properly once you realize they've been taught, some corrupt things. You might have to unlearn them.
Right,
But
right.
there's some other options out there, aren't there, Paul?
There are, yeah. So like I said, if you haven't been in public school, one of your options is to get involved and teach them on the side too. But also send them to private school. You can look at private school, which isn't always the greatest because some of these private schools are pretty woke too, and they're going through their things and they're complying with a lot of stuff they shouldn't be. But homeschool, homeschools are, homeschools are 100 times better than public schools. Probably a lot better than private schools too. But I think the socialization, if you don't address the socialization in homeschool by sending them to a class where like martial arts class or some kind of extracurricular activity where they can mingle with other kids, I think you start having a little bit of problems. Like they create that bubble for themselves. I know some homeschool families that are pretty good. They are socializing. They're figuring out, okay, if a parent tries to teach their kids stuff, the kid's a little bit reluctant. Geez, it's more talking from my mom and dad. But if someone else tries to teach them, they're way more attentive. So that's another thing about homeschool. So
And I totally agree with you, Paul. Public schools, definitely not the best way to go. Homeschooling is much better.
yeah,
Of course, you can always get better and better. And
yeah,
I kind of beat up on homeschooling a little bit last episode, but I'm totally agree with you that homeschooling at this point in time is the better option.
right,
And if you can, and also just make it even better if you can introduce a little bit more diversity of thought from other conservatives.
right,
Not
exactly.
necessarily, and it's good to introduce that
Right.
from everywhere. But go ahead.
So how do we get there, right? That's the real question. How do we make homeschool platform better? I think the best way to make that better is to do community schooling, co-op schooling, pod. They call it pod learning. I don't know exactly what that means, but I believe it's like where the kids kind of come together from a community, and they're taught. They hire it. The parents can get together, pay the teacher, right? Some teachers. We have so much technology now that these teachers could get paid through crowdfunding and through have classes online where they're not taking a ton of time out of their day, and there's so much stuff available to conservative parents to teach kids, and we just have to figure out the best system. It's time to act. It's time. We're losing this country. We're losing our kids. It's time to act right now. We cannot hesitate any longer. So
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's not one silver bullet, right?
right,
We've got all these tools in the toolboxes. I'm not going to suggest that you should be doing online learning only, right?
right,
There's Zoom, all these remote options to bring in different kinds of teachers. That's great, but you got to have in-person learning too.
yeah, yeah. Oh yeah,
You
definitely.
got to have
Yeah,
activities to be outside and be out
right,
to learn nature and how things operate from a biological standpoint. So yeah, I mean, these things are all important, and there's a whole suite
right.
of ways you got to apply
Sure.
learning and teaching. But as far as any other action items, anything else, Paul, before I kind of hit on what's happening locally?
Well, let's see. Let me look at my list here. That's pretty much. That's pretty much it. Just get involved and try to find alternatives. Get together with your neighbors and your community, church family. You know, you got something for local. You say, huh?
Yeah, and that's a great point. Your church resources, church is already a very well established in-person community. And so to build on that, I think it's phenomenal. That leads right into our next item about, hey, what can you do locally? What are some of the
Okay.
things that you can be involved in right now? And so I'm just going to jump right over here to this. We're doing an event. The Education Task Force is a local community organization that is hosting an event on Sunday, April 24th. Starts at 5:30 p.m. right here at Moorhead Marriott, Courtyard by Marriott. What we're doing is we're bringing in a special guest speaker. He's from out of state, from Wisconsin. His name is Pastor Matt Truella, and he's got a movement. He's got several 100,000 followers, and he travels around teaching on the biblical justification to defy tyrants.
Yeah.
All right.
That's
It's
Moorhead,
called
Minnesota.
That's
Yeah,
right.
because
Moorhead,
people are going to
Minnesota.
see this from all over. So.
I think there's another Moorhead down in Carolinas, maybe,
Oh, okay.
but this one's up in Minnesota, yeah. And so it's a free event. We do ask for donations, but we'll feed you. We got a pasta bar. We've got a few other speakers, and we also will show you what it looks like to organize a community, how to
Nice.
organize, and what it looks like to organize, so you can take this stuff back to your home community or locally, and start building and mobilizing and actually building influence in our community, building the conservative movement in your community back home. So show up to that. You can register online on Eventbrite. The event's called "The State Is Not God" by the Education Task Force. So check it out, Sunday, April 24th.
All right, good deal. So there's some action right there, you know.
Absolutely.
Get out
Yeah,
there.
we got a Facebook page too. You can jump on there, Education
Okay.
Task Force. But just again, it's all about action. We're not sitting around complaining about what's going on, but actually doing is part of it.
Okay. Do you have any platforms you want to shout out that people can get a hold of you at, or get in touch or get active other than that?
Well, I'll just kind of pitch one more time, maybe my campaign. You can reach me at senator.hahn@gmail.com. Also, it's We Win with Edwin. WeWinWithEdwin.com is our campaign, our state Senate campaign. And just if you get in touch with me that way, I can plug you into all the other community groups that are growing and mobilizing in the state and in our region. Well, we've got a Second Amendment stronghold group. We've got education, we just mentioned, health freedom, election integrity, and another important one that we're going to have remarks on at the event on the 24th is ESG, environmental social governance.
Yeah.
Elon Musk just tweeted about that this last week, and it's just caught on fire.
Social credit score and all that stuff.
Yeah, the whole social credit and digital currency, one world currency, and all this stuff they're trying to shove down our throats.
Wow, they're sneaky, aren't they? We're on to them though.
That's right.
I don't. You can contact me at most of my social medias at Silver Bear. You just look up Silver Bear and you'll pretty much find me. But I don't have Facebook. I don't have Twitter. I just got rid of all the mainstream. No Instagram. No Snapchat. I only have platforms on free speech platforms. Minds, Gab, Odyssey. There's a few other ones, but Rockfin just recently. I don't know what I'm going to do with that yet, but. You can get a hold of me on any of those platforms. So,
and maybe there's hope for Twitter. Now we got Elon on there, who's a free speech proponent.
He refused to sign up or join the board. Did you see?
And there may be a strategy for that. I don't know the details, but I think there may be something in the works where he's got a little bit more in mind. Yeah.
On the board, he's limited to 14%, I guess. But off the board, he can pretty much buy whatever he wants. Is what I understand it.
He's not a dumb guy, so
no,
he knows what he's doing.
Yeah, it's kind of weird though. I will say this about him: he'll say weird things about, or he'll say like things that like compliment China, and then he'll turn around and say things that compliment the United States, and I'm just like going, are you playing both sides? Like what? Like stick with something. But he is a businessman. China has this stuff for space. That's what he's into. He's going there. He's taking it there. Maybe he just has to be nice, play nice with these guys to get what he wants. I don't know, but so I kind of keep an eye on him. But other than that, I guess he's all right. Maybe we'll see.
Yeah. No one is no one's their savior. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And definitely don't worship Elon or Trump. That's right. My opinion, anyways. So.
Yeah, and I my saying is, I don't know him, I don't trust him. Like I trust people I know. But if I don't know you personally, I don't fully trust you and never will.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Good.
All right. Well, that pretty much wraps it up for today. Come back next time. We're going to talk about, I don't know, what do you want to talk about? Taxes? What do you think? How we could talk about
Well, taxes always, especially right now, it's tax season, April 18th.
Yeah.
You got to file, get all your garbage in by that time.
Okay.
Taxes always fun to talk about. I'd almost like to hear a little bit more about this idea of citizen and how did that work its way into American culture? Citizen, what is that?
Yeah, how did that happen? Boy, that's a deep side. You might have to do a couple segments on that one. So.